She was a beautiful young mother who cherished her daughters more than anything.
My mom was very, very active with myself and my sister. She fought for us no matter what.
So finding romance was the last thing on her mind until it found her.
She was a shoulder for him to cry on. They had a spark.
My sister was like, hey, I have a new boyfriend and I want y'all to meet him.
She felt like he might have been the one.
But when she goes missing, could he be to blame?
He was away during the time of the murder.
I knew it was something really, really wrong.
A trail of clues leads police to a disturbing crime scene.
There's blood everywhere.
It was horrific. I couldn't breathe.
Life went upside down.
And the unbelievable con that ended up in murder.
It was like, wow, are you serious?
He was supposed to be in prison.
She fought to keep her life from ending.
It gives me chills all these years later.
February 4th, 1995. It's a typical Saturday in Tulsa, a city of 375,000 in the heart of Oklahoma oil country.
Tulsa is, I think, probably one of the jewels of Oklahoma. It's a great city. You have all the arts and entertainment, restaurants, good bars to go to.
Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's bad when you say that you're from Tulsa because there's a lot of crime that happens here.
I would say it's a safe community, but I would say per capita, we have a high homicide rate. I've grappled with it my whole career.
So when local resident Maxine Thomas makes a call to Tulsa police in the middle of the night, they're prepared to spring into action.
Tulsa Police, how can I help you?
Yes, I need to file a missing persons report.
Maxine says her friend Sharonda Clark has disappeared. No one has seen or heard from Sharonda in over 12 hours.
Maxine says the 20-year-old mother of two had failed to pick her children up from daycare earlier that evening.
Sharonda had a 4-year-old daughter and a 1.5-year-old daughter, and they were at the daycare, and she didn't go to pick them up as normal.
She always picks her kids up after work. There's no way she would have left them there without telling anyone.
That day, it just kept getting later and later, and slowly the daycare emptied. It was just myself, my sister, and the workers for the daycare. They were calling, but no one was coming or picking up.
Since Maxine was listed as an emergency contact, she was able to step in for Sharonda's two girls.
Fortunately, she was able to come and get them.
I picked up the girls. We went to Sharonda's to look for her.
We go and knock on the door to see if we could get my mom to answer, but no one answered. That was a really, really big flag for myself at the age of 4.
She's a good mom. She wouldn't just abandon her kids like this.
That wasn't like Sharonda to not communicate.
She always gets her kids back.
She never, ever, ever done that.
Sharonda was the type of mother who would stop whatever she was doing to make sure that her kids are okay.
Something must have happened to her. That's the only thing I can think of.
Okay, we're going to send 2 units out to that location.
My mom was very, very active with myself and my sister. She was that parent, so I knew it was something really, really wrong.
They were worried about what could be happening to Sharonda.
For 20-year-old Sharonda Clark, motherhood began at a young age.
She was 14 when she first became a mom.
Of course, my grandparents didn't want her to become a teen parent, but she did. I'm her oldest, and she was her mom's oldest as well. So in a lot of ways, we were a lot alike. Her being brand new to parenting, me being brand new.
She loved her daughter, Yashin. She did. She really did. She stopped school to take care of her baby. And so she did odd jobs until she was old enough to work at a real job. The father was real young, too.
It was about 15. So it was hard.
However, Sharonda's friends and family rallied around her to help.
We always kicked in and made sure that she had diapers. We worked together to do the best that she could for her daughter. It takes a village. That's all I can say.
Do you need me to still watch her tomorrow?
Oh, yes, that would be amazing. You know, she loves her auntie Jamaica.
I love her too.
I know. I'm ready for her to grow up.
In the spring of 1992, Sharonda became pregnant again, this time with her daughter, Majorine.
I was 12 when Majorine was born, and it was just like having another little sister, little sibling.
She loved that little baby. Oh my goodness. She was always smiling, always smiling.
Majorine's father was a man from the neighborhood, Travis Wells.
How's she doing?
Good. I think she's about to fall asleep.
My mom and my daddy were crazy. Crazy about each other.
So much so that they decided to tie the knot right after Majorine was born.
She was a young married mom, so she experienced not only being a teenage mom, but she also experienced being a teen wife.
She was still really young, but she made good decisions and strong decisions, and there was nobody that was going to tell her different.
She loves the families she's built.
But unfortunately, just 1 year into the marriage, it began to crumble.
They just began to grow apart, which could happen in any marriage, especially when you start a marriage so young.
That relationship didn't work out.
They ended up separating when Sharonda was 19 years old.
But Sharonda didn't let such a jarring life change get her down.
Sharonda continued to do whatever it took to provide for her 2 children. She worked multiple jobs. She became a manager of a retail chain.
She, with 2 young children, found her own place. She paid her own bills.
Sharonda was a fighter.
She fought for us no matter what. Do anything for us that she could to try to protect us.
As a single mom, Sharonda's busy life didn't leave much time for romance. But later that same year, she'd find a connection in a place she least expected it.
Hey, you okay?
Initially, Sharonda had met Jermaine at his brother's funeral, and being the caring kind of person that she was a shoulder for him to cry on.
I just can't believe he's gone. It's like it hasn't sunk in yet.
23-year-old Jermaine Cannon welcomed Sharonda's compassionate spirit with open arms.
That's how they started communicating. Just to have somebody to talk to laugh with, because she was so funny. And, you know, just to give him a head change.
I bet he's living large up there, though.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Sharonda was a light to everyone who met her, including Jermaine.
Before long, their friendship turned into a romance, a relationship that Sharonda was hopeful would finally be the one.
My sister called up to my parents and was like, hey, I have a new boyfriend and I want y'all to meet him.
She was taking things slowly, but her heart was open.
However, it's been more than 12 hours since anyone has seen or heard from Sharonda, and fears are mounting that something terrible may have happened to her.
Sharonda Clark is missing.
She hadn't picked up her kids from daycare.
That wasn't like Sharonda to not communicate.
All right, thank you.
A missing persons report is filed.
Tulsa police begin their investigation by heading to Sharonda's apartment.
The police basically broke in the door.
Police!
When police got inside, they found overturned furniture, spilled food, and bloody walls, indicating a struggle had took place.
There's blood in the kitchen. There's blood in the living room. There's shoe marks of blood all over.
But nothing could prepare police for what they find when they look into the hallway.
They witnessed a horrendous scene.
There was so much blood.
She didn't deserve this.
After separating from her husband, Travis Wells, 20-year-old mother of two Sharonda Clark had come out on the other side even stronger.
Sharonda was headed in the right direction.
She was willing to do whatever it takes to provide for her two children.
She made sure that we were always together.
Working, tending to us, maintaining friendships, nothing seemed to stop her.
And when she met 23-year-old Jermaine Cannon at the most unlikely of places, it seemed as if she might get another chance at love.
She wound up finding someone who respected and appreciated and loved her.
Police.
But in February of 1995, as Valentine's Day approaches, police have discovered a bloody scene inside Sharonda's apartment.
As police were investigating the scene, they noticed a trail of blood leading into the hallway. And when they followed it, they witnessed an even more grisly scene.
They saw the victim laying on the floor, on her back.
Sharonda Clark was dead.
The responding officers immediately call for backup.
I was on call that specific day and night, and you always know when your pager goes off, we still carried pagers then, that you were ready to go. I mean, it was just expected that you were going to have to get out and see something that you really didn't want to see.
When Detective Fultz arrives on the scene, it's clear he's looking at a homicide.
We started looking at the victim and noticed quite a few stab marks on her body.
Someone stabbed her 3 times in the neck region, which severed her carotid artery, her jugular, and then the final blow was a stab wound to the chest.
Apart from those fatal blows, Sharonda also suffered numerous smaller cuts to her hands and arms.
She had what's called defensive wounds. You can imagine a knife coming down on you, and she's got her hand up in the air trying to protect herself.
I certainly believe that she did everything she could to keep her life from ending. She fought, she struggled.
Near Sharonda's body, investigators find what they believe is the murder weapon.
The knife was found fairly close to the body. The handle was broken. It was very bloody.
They bag it up for further examination.
Police find more signs of violence inside Sharonda's bedroom.
They found a trail of blood leading to the bedroom.
In the bedroom, everything was in disarray.
There's blood everywhere and spatter on the walls.
It was apparent from looking at the blood stains and the blood trails that the majority of violence and the stabbing occurred in the bedroom. Our suspect had stabbed the victim numerous times and then dragged her from the bedroom into the hallway.
There's something else in the bedroom that catches investigators' attention.
There was a broken window in the bedroom.
At first glance, it appears to be a robbery, but when police further investigate,
When Sharonda was struggling against her killer,
other evidence also runs counter to the robbery theory.
there's no signs of forced entry. Nothing appears to be missing.
It looked like Sharonda had let this person into the house.
Someone that uses a knife when it's up close like this, it's extremely personal. It shows me as an investigator that this person had absolutely no regard but rage toward our victim.
When the tragic news reaches Sharonda's loved ones, they're devastated.
I've seen my dad cry, but not like that. My first thought was, Why did this happen? How could this happen to our family?
I couldn't breathe. It was devastating for something like that extreme to happen to somebody that you love so much.
You hear mom's gone, mom's not coming back. Almost immediately, life went upside down.
As the sun comes up over Tulsa, investigators start canvassing the apartment complex for potential witnesses.
Ask you a couple questions about what.
Investigators reached out to neighbors to see if they had seen anything.
One woman tells police she was friendly with Sharonda, and the young mother was well-liked among the other residents at the apartment complex.
She got along with everybody. People loved to hang out with her.
But Sharonda's neighbor also says she noticed something unusual on Friday afternoon, the day Sharonda disappeared.
I was coming home from the store earlier, and I saw her outside talking to somebody.
According to the neighbor, the two appeared to be in a heated exchange, some type of argument.
They were really going at it, and I can tell she was pretty upset.
To police, it looks like this person could be Sharonda's killer.
Get away from me!
Thanks to one of Sharonda Clark's neighbors, Tulsa detectives have learned that the mother of two was spotted arguing with an unidentified man on the afternoon before her death.
Could you hear what they were arguing about?
No, they were too far away, but it looked pretty heated.
She didn't know the cause of the argument.
But she was worried about Sharonda, and so later on that night, she gave her a call.
She called about 5:30 p.m.
The phone rang, and then somebody finally answered, but it wasn't Sharonda.
It's a man. The neighbor believes it was the same man who was arguing with Sharonda that day.
Hi, may I please speak to Sharonda?
Yeah, Sharonda's not here right now. Give me the phone.
He was telling her that Sharonda was not there, but she could hear Sharonda in the background, and then he ended up hanging up on her. And that was probably the last time anybody heard Sharonda alive.
Detectives are hoping her neighbor can help them identify Sharonda's mysterious male companion.
Investigators asked the neighbor if she could recognize him, if she knew what he looked like, what he was wearing.
But they're out of luck.
I saw them from pretty far away, so I really couldn't get a very good look at them.
All that she could recall was that he was a black man in his 20s.
Thank you for your time, man.
Tracking down this new suspect is now investigators' #1 priority.
Sharonda recently separated from her ex-husband, Travis Wells.
Could he be the person she was arguing with that day?
In cases like this, police usually start their investigation with those closest to the victim or anyone they've recently had a disagreement with.
However, it's soon clear Sharonda and her ex didn't have any bad blood.
They were still on amicable terms, that they had exchanged and arranged visitation for their child.
They both got along with one another and were co-parenting and being able to communicate with each other.
After their separation, Travis hadn't even stayed in Tulsa.
Majorene's dad, he moved to Ohio and didn't come back.
He was away during the time of the murder.
Without Travis Wells as a suspect, detectives are back at square one.
Next, investigators subpoena Sharonda's phone records and her bank records, hoping to find something that will give them a clue to what happened.
As detectives pore over the records, they're looking for anything that might raise a red flag.
They looked through all of her recent communications and transactions, but nothing stood out.
They come up empty.
Forensic testing on the murder weapon also leads to a dead end.
They were hoping to recover some fingerprints from the knife, but there was nothing there.
Less than 24 hours into their murder investigation, detectives are already running out of leads. But when they start reaching out to Sharonda's circle of friends, they finally make some headway.
One of Sharonda's friends tells them that she knows of a man Sharonda had been seeing.
Yeah. She met this guy at the funeral for his brother. His name is Jermaine Cannon.
The two of them really hit it off, and Sharonda seemed happy.
However, Sharonda's romance with Jermaine soon hit a roadblock.
One day, Jermaine was just gone.
She told me he took off. She didn't know where he went or what happened to him. And
She kind of felt like he might have been the one. Then he disappeared.
She was devastated. She had opened her heart up to someone. Had she missed something?
However, in January of 1995, Jermaine reappeared.
Out of nowhere, Jermaine landed back on her doorstep. Sharonda was shocked.
Did you miss me?
Jermaine? What are you doing here?
Sharonda was happy to see him.
But she was also hesitant to let Jermaine back into her life.
She couldn't rid her mind of those questions. What happened? Why did he leave?
It's been months, Jermaine. Where have you been?
He said, I had to go out of town to take care of some family stuff. He kind of dodged the question, and then he asked Sharonda if he could stay with her.
Why didn't you just let me know where you were going? You just up and left.
I'm sorry, baby. It all happened so fast, but I'm here now. We can be together again.
I don't think she was really comfortable with it, but she said he could stay. He didn't have any place else to go.
She still wanted to carry on this relationship. She just loved him unconditionally.
But after Jermaine moved in, Sharonda quickly came to regret her decision.
She didn't feel like he was being totally honest with her.
Sharonda was probably pulling away from the relationship, and that's when the aggression started.
Jermaine turned violent.
They were fighting. People were starting to notice bruises on Sharonda.
And as the tensions grew, Sharonda confronted Jermaine over his lies.
What do you want? I want to know where you've been all these months. And I want the truth this time.
Fine, okay? You really want to know?
She found out that he was escaped from jail.
He was a wanted man.
Police in Tulsa, Oklahoma have been trying to identify the man Sharonda Clark was seen arguing with on the day before her body was found.
A neighbor reported seeing Sharonda having an intense argument outside of her apartment with a young black male.
Now, thanks to one of Sharonda's close friends, police think they know who that man was. 23-year-old Jermaine Cannon.
According to the friend, Jermaine and Sharonda had a tumultuous relationship.
A relationship that became even more turbulent after Sharonda learned the truth about her new beau.
I want to know where you've been all these months. And I want the truth this time.
Fine. You really want to know?
Jermaine had been in prison.
What do you mean prison?
I mean, I got locked up, but then I got away.
On the day that he showed up at her door, he'd escaped. The news just shocked Sharonda.
When she told me that, I knew he was bad news. I told her she needed to get away from him.
Sharonda wholeheartedly agreed.
If she knew what had occurred as far as him being escapee, I really don't have any doubt that she wouldn't have let him in her apartment.
She knew she couldn't have that around her children.
Now, do you have any recollection of Jermaine?
Here and there, like glimpses of him coming in, not really knowing who he was, being a kid asking, who is this? Who's staying over? That kind of thing. So it wasn't like, oh, he had been here for a long time.
In the days before she was killed, friends believe Sharonda had been making plans to remove Jermaine from her apartment and her life for good.
She was preparing to kick him out.
One day, Sharonda called her friend, asking if she could watch her children because she was worried about them being in the house.
Sharonda had called my mother and told her that I needed to get a hold of her ASAP. So I called her phone, but I didn't get any answer from her. I was a little concerned, but I wasn't really too stressed about it because I wasn't sure exactly what she wanted.
Sharonda made these calls. On the same day, the neighbors saw her arguing with the man outside.
For detectives, the picture of what happened to Sharonda is becoming clearer.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming down.
So now detectives are starting to put this puzzle together. They think what the neighbors saw was Sharonda kicking Jermaine out of her apartment.
When detectives run a background check on Jermaine, they're able to confirm much of what Sharonda's friends have told them.
We determined that Mr. Cannon had a history of being violent toward women.
Police came across an incident report involving a woman who claimed that Jermaine had burglarized and assaulted her.
He snuck in through a basement window, and she woke up with his hand over her mouth.
A more recent arrest suggests that Jermaine's pattern of violence has been escalating.
The second woman, a former girlfriend, he ended up getting into an argument with her and tried to kill her by using an iron, a toaster, and a hammer, and left her for dead.
She was very fortunate not to have been killed.
He got prosecuted for an assault and battery with intent to kill and got 15 years.
But Jermaine wasn't behind bars for long.
They quickly learned that he had indeed escaped prison.
It was a medium security type facility where they had some freedom. They weren't locked down all the time.
And for whatever reason, he got it in his head that I've had enough of this being incarcerated.
He stole a bus and made his way to Tulsa.
Now, detectives are more determined than ever to track down Jermaine. But that proves easier said than done.
No one has seen him since the day before Sharonda's disappearance.
However, their luck changes when police receive intel from an unexpected source.
The lead detective gets a call. A woman claims to have information about Sharonda's case.
Yes. Is this the detective who's looking for Jermaine Cannon?
Yes, ma'am.
The caller is Jermaine's mother.
She knew her son was in trouble.
She put the pieces together.
Police in Tulsa, Oklahoma have discovered that just a few weeks before she was killed, Sharonda Clark had been tricked into welcoming an escaped convict into her home.
I was in prison.
Jermaine Cannon stole a truck, ended up in Tulsa, and she was just trying to help him out.
Now investigators are searching for the suspected killer, and they've just received a promising lead on his whereabouts.
Yes, ma'am.
They received a phone call from Jermaine's mother. She tipped them off that he had gone to Flint, Michigan.
So you're saying he's in Flint right now?
Yes, sir.
And how do you know this?
He told me himself.
She tells investigators that Jermaine called her, and it surprised her because she knew he was supposed to be in prison.
Somehow or other, he had gotten out of prison. And he said that he was about to take a bus to Flint.
What Flint?
That's where his uncle is.
Jermaine also told his mother the police were after him for something he didn't do.
That something was the murder of Sharonda Clark.
Jermaine told his mother that he did get in a fight with Sharonda, but it wasn't what it looked like. He insisted on that.
The family didn't want to believe that Jermaine would do this, but they also understood that it was very likely that he had, given his actions, the fact that he had been staying there, the fact that he had escaped from prison.
I told him to turn himself in, but he wouldn't listen to me.
Okay, thank you.
After speaking with Jermaine's mother,
Michigan.
Tulsa detectives immediately reach out to law enforcement in Michigan.
They contacted the Flint Police Department and were arranging to have Jermaine arrested at his uncle's house.
But before they can make their move, investigators receive another surprising phone call.
Jermaine actually called Detective Fultz.
He called me. Pretty unusual for a suspect to voluntarily call, but his family had convinced him that it would be in his best interest.
Jermaine tells investigators he knows what the crime scene looks like. He knows how bad it is, but he wants them to give him a chance to tell his side of the story.
Within hours, Jermaine turns himself over to law enforcement.
Investigators explain to Jermaine that they already know he escaped from prison. They ask him to start from there.
Jermaine says once he made his escape, he headed straight for Sharonda's apartment.
He went to Sharonda because they had a spark before he'd gone to prison.
Look, I needed some place to go where I thought the cops wouldn't find me. And I thought that maybe she would let me stay with her.
Jermaine tells investigators that they quickly hit it off. Things were going good for a while, but eventually they began arguing.
Then she started getting on my case about every little thing, and...
He's painting Sharonda as the aggressor in this relationship. He claimed that she was violent and she was intimidating.
Then, on February 3rd, he says the tensions reached a breaking point.
Jermaine tells investigators that he decided to leave, but he was worried about what Sharonda might do to him, and so he wasn't going to tell her.
Look, I was going to just slip out, okay? Because, I just didn't need her going off on me again.
But Jermaine says before he could make his exit, Sharonda realized what he was up to.
As he was packing up his things, Sharonda came and questioned him. "What are you doing?"
I can't do this anymore, Sharonda.
What do you mean?
I can't do this no more.
What can't you do?
This!
So you're leaving?
Yes.
He said I was leaving her and she didn't want me to leave.
And she was really mad and she started physically attacking me.
He says after a while, he had no choice but to fight back.
During the struggle, Jermaine says they shattered Sharonda's bedroom window.
Jermaine says Sharonda went ballistic, lunging at him with a knife, cutting him. The struggle ensued to get control of it.
In the struggle, the knife hit the floor. They both looked at the knife, and he dove for it.
After tracking their suspect almost 1,000 miles from Tulsa, Oklahoma to Flint, Michigan, homicide detectives have arrested Jermaine Cannon for the murder of his girlfriend, Sharonda Clark.
He showed us that he was a very dangerous man. Here's a guy that can't stay out of custody 22 days before he tries to kill somebody else.
But according to Jermaine, Sharonda was the dangerous one in their relationship.
Jermaine's side of the story was that Sharonda was the aggressor and that he was afraid of Sharonda.
Jermaine tells police that on February 3rd, he and Sharonda got into an argument when he revealed that he was leaving her.
Jermaine says she spiraled out of control.
He said we got in an argument and she pulled a knife on him.
Chill.
He was able to gain control of the knife to protect himself.
He admitted that he killed her, but he said he did it in self-defense.
Jermaine says once he realized what he'd done, he tried to help Sharonda.
Look, I didn't want her to die.
He tries to drag her body to the bathroom to find something to stop the bleeding.
He said I was going to get her first aid.
But Jermaine could tell that Sharonda was already dead.
I couldn't call the cops because, I was a wanted man.
So what did you do?
I got out of there.
He then bought a bus ticket to Flint, Michigan, and went up and knocked on his uncle's door.
Mr. Cannon did not admit that he was at fault. He blamed the victim for the whole thing, said it was all her fault.
Investigators don't buy a word of it.
It's nothing but a story, because there's nothing in evidence that supports his story.
For one thing, Jermaine doesn't have any of the defensive wounds detectives would expect to see if Sharonda had really attacked him with a knife.
He shows detectives his hand.
Didn't have a scratch on it.
What Jermaine was saying couldn't possibly be true. There was no way that she was the aggressor in this situation.
It was the bloodiest scene I've ever prosecuted. The amount of blood indicating that she was running, trying to get away from him until she couldn't get away anymore. So there just wasn't anything to support his story.
Investigators charged him with first-degree murder.
When Jermaine's trial begins on March 12, 1996, prosecutors outline what they believe really happened that night.
They say that the argument Sharonda's neighbor witnessed was her confronting him over his lies and abuse.
Sharonda wanted him to leave.
But for Jermaine, that wasn't an option.
If she put him out, he would have nowhere to go.
He knew that things would be only worse for him if he had to go back to prison after escaping.
Instead of packing his bags, Jermaine stood his ground.
You think I'm gonna let you kick me out after everything I went through?
He enjoyed his freedom, and he wasn't going to let anyone, not even Sharonda, stop him.
Jermaine was enraged and tried to beat Sharonda into submission.
But when that wasn't enough, Jermaine went into the kitchen and grabbed a knife.
Get away. Get away from me. Get away from me.
He then started to chase her through the house.
She's running all over this house trying to save her life. I mean, the sheer terror that she went through.
He stabbed Sharonda in cold blood.
He ended up stabbing her 4 times. It gives me chills all these years later. I'm sure it did the same thing to the jury.
Jermaine's own demeanor in the courtroom does little to help his case.
During the trial, he was sitting there with a smile on his face. And it was like, wow, are you serious?
When I saw him, I was kind of shocked. He had this cocky attitude about him, like, yeah, I'm going to win. There was no remorse. He didn't care.
It takes the jury just 2 short hours to reach a decision.
The jury found Jermaine Cannon guilty of first-degree murder.
It was tears, like, yes, finally, we were happy and relieved.
The jury sentenced him to death by lethal injection, and ultimately, that sentence was carried out July 20th, 2023.
More than 28 years after her murder, Sharonda's loved ones are present for Jermaine's execution.
So we get in the room first, and you could see him mouthing and talking to his family like, I love you, and thumbs up, and grinning. And I'm just like, I'm instantly irritated because my mom didn't get to do any of this. She didn't get to pick her last meal. She damn sure didn't get to say goodbye to anybody. So it was like a slap in the face. It kind of felt like we were doing a make-a-wish for a death row individual.
Jermaine Cannon had an opportunity to say some last words before they started the execution.
His final words are, I confess with my mouth and believe with my heart that God raised Jesus from the dead. Therefore, I am saved.
I know it hurt my niece, my oldest initiation, more because he got to live basically a whole nother 30 years, a whole life.
Afterwards, I felt confused. I mean, I was happy that I was there. I was happy that seen it through. I was happy that I got to support my mom when she couldn't. It was just disappointing in the mannerism of how the system was set up to carry it out.
It's very sobering experience. You never really want to witness somebody's death. However, in my opinion, the earth is a better place without Jermaine Cannon on it.
Nearly 3 decades later, Sharonda's daughters are still struggling to cope with their mother's death.
I'm still dealing with it. I'm angry, lost, kind of. The only thing that really helps me navigate through it is my family.
I'll never forget where I came from, the things that she did for me, the sacrifices that she made. She may not be here in flesh, but she's definitely here in spirit.
This revelation solidified the jury's decision. Timothy Shepard was found guilty of murder and received the maximum sentence of 99 years in prison, ensuring he would no longer pose a danger to others while providing a somber sense of closure to a family that had endured unimaginable grief. Part 2. The Tangled Web of Obsession. The study of homicide investigations frequently reveals that the most violent acts are often committed by individuals driven by deeply personal, internal conflicts. On the cold winter morning of Wednesday, January 30th, 2008, at approximately 7:30 in the morning, motorists traveling along Interstate 540 in Raleigh, North Carolina, noticed what appeared to be a person lying in the grass beside the highway. Emergency personnel quickly arrived and confirmed that the young woman was deceased. The initial assumption that she might have been a pedestrian involved in a vehicular accident was rapidly dismissed when investigators observed that she had suffered multiple sharp force injuries to her face, neck, and torso. Among the commuters traveling on the interstate that morning was Darren Curtis. Observing the active crime scene and the blue tarp covering the victim, Darren continued his drive only to discover his wife's white sedan parked on the shoulder of the highway approximately half a mile further down the road. Filled with sudden apprehension, he returned to the scene, where law enforcement officers eventually confirmed his worst fears. The deceased young woman was his 21-year-old wife, Latrice Curtis, a dedicated business administration student at North Carolina Central University. The medical examiner's report detailed the extreme violence of the assault, noting that Latrice had been stabbed upwards of 40 times. Her carotid artery and jugular vein had been severed, and she had sustained numerous defensive injuries to her hands, indicating that she had struggled courageously against her attacker. The presence of her personal jewelry ruled out robbery as a primary motive. Instead, the sheer number of wounds pointed to an intense personal anger on the part of the perpetrator. A crucial piece of physical evidence was recovered during the post-mortem examination, a contraceptive device that indicated recent intimate activity, though there were no physical signs of involuntary sexual assault. To understand the circumstances surrounding her death, detectives subpoenaed the telephone records of both Latrice and Darren. The records confirmed Darren's account of his communications with his wife on the evening of January 29th, 2008. He explained that she had called him around 10 o'clock in the evening to state she was running late from her studies and planned to get some food. Darren had fallen asleep around 11:30 in the evening, assuming she had decided to stay at her parents' house and had tried to contact her the following morning before leaving for work at 7:30. However, the telephone records also revealed a significant number of calls exchanged between Latrice's phone and an unfamiliar number around midnight. This number was traced to Stephen Randolph, a prominent student and basketball player at the university who harbored aspirations of playing in the National Basketball Association. Within 2 days of the discovery of Latrice's body, Stephen voluntarily came to the sheriff's office to speak with investigators, accompanied by his housemate, Robert Reeves, a local pastor and influential community figure often referred to as the bishop. During his initial interview, Stephen claimed that his relationship with Latrice was strictly academic. However, when confronted with the forensic findings and telephone logs, he admitted that they had engaged in a secret sexual relationship. He explained that on the night of the murder, Latrice had visited his residence, and during their encounter, a contraceptive device had become dislodged. Unable to retrieve it, Latrice had left around 10 o'clock in the evening, planning to address the issue at home. Stephen stated that he had subsequently driven to the home of his primary girlfriend, Velma Newton, where he remained until approximately 1 o'clock in the morning. He claimed that Latrice had repeatedly called him during this time, expressing anxiety over a potential pregnancy. To verify these statements, detectives interviewed Pastor Robert Reeves, who lived in the same residence as Stephen. The 43-year-old minister confirmed that Latrice had visited Stephen that evening and that he had seen her car outside before leaving for a church service at 8:15 in the evening. He stated that when he returned at 11:30 in the evening, both vehicles were gone. Reeves also mentioned that Stephen had later confided in him about Latrice's late-night phone call, during which she reportedly expressed a desire to elevate their relationship, a prospect that Stephen apparently did not welcome due to his focus on his athletic career. As investigators sought to verify these timelines, they received a critical report from a state trooper who had been patrolling Interstate 540 on the night of the crime. At approximately 1:30 in the morning, the trooper had observed a disabled vehicle with its hazard lights flashing on the eastbound shoulder. Upon running the registration plates, the vehicle was found to belong to Pastor Robert Reeves. The trooper had also noticed a white sedan matching Latrice's vehicle parked on the westbound shoulder opposite the pastor's car, but had been called away to another incident before he could investigate further. This discovery shifted the focus of the investigation toward the pastor. When re-interviewed, Reeves denied having driven his vehicle that night, suggesting instead that Stephen might have borrowed it. However, Stephen denied this, and his girlfriend confirmed that Stephen had been at her residence during the key hours. Furthermore, investigators noticed deep scratches and abrasions on Reeves' arms and hands, which the pastor claimed were the result of an accident while moving a desk with Stephen. Stephen, however, had no recollection of any such accident. As detectives delved deeper into the pastor's background, they uncovered a complex and troubled personal history that contrasted sharply with his public persona. Telephone records revealed that Reeves had been making numerous blocked, anonymous phone calls to Stephen and Velma, attempting to disrupt their relationship. It became increasingly evident that Reeves harbored an intense, possessive obsession with his young roommate and had previously made unwanted sexual advances toward him, which Stephen had rejected. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when the results of the genetic analysis were returned from the crime lab. While Stephen's genetic material was found under Latrice's fingernails, which the prosecution attributed to their intimate encounter earlier that evening, the steering wheel of Latrice's abandoned vehicle contained a mixture of genetic material that belonged directly to Pastor Robert Reeves. On February 2nd, 2008, Robert Reeves was formally arrested and charged with first-degree murder. During his trial in September of 2009, the prosecution presented a compelling case detailing how the pastor's obsessive jealousy towards Stephen had driven him to target Latrice. The prosecution argued that Reeves had followed Latrice from the residence, forced her to pull over on the dark highway, and killed her in a desperate, irrational belief that removing her from Stephen's life would somehow make Stephen more receptive to his own advances. The defense attempted to argue that the genetic material found in the car was the result of passive transfer from the shared residence, and suggested that Stephen had a stronger motive to commit the crime to protect his career from an unwanted pregnancy. However, the jury found the combination of the state trooper's sighting of the pastor's car, the scratches on his arms, his false alibi, and the direct physical evidence to be overwhelming. After 2 days of deliberation on October 9th, 2009, Robert Reeves was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, exposing the tragic consequences of a destructive obsession. Part 3. The fragmented memory of a fatal conflict. The human mind possesses complex mechanisms to cope with extreme trauma, sometimes blocking out the very memories of events that are too devastating to process. On December 11th, 2004, shortly after 4 o'clock in the morning, a hotel manager in Gainesville, Texas, responded to an urgent request from a guest's room. Upon entering the locked room with the assistance of maintenance staff, they discovered a woman lying on the floor in a severely disoriented and injured state. She had sustained a gunshot wound to her head, and a .25 caliber handgun lay near her on the floor. Emergency. Medical technicians rushed her to a trauma center where she survived her life-threatening injuries, but was left with permanent physical and cognitive impairments. The injured woman was identified as Denise Miller, who, along with her boyfriend, police officer Wayne Irby, had been reported missing from the nearby town of Little Elm, Texas, just 24 hours earlier. Wayne A., 37-year-old, 6-year veteran of the Little Elm Police Department, had failed to report for his scheduled 6 o'clock in the morning shift on December 10th, 2004, immediately raising alarms among his colleagues who knew him to be exceptionally punctual and dedicated to his duties. A welfare check at the residence Denise shared with her 2 teenage children revealed that neither adult had been seen since the previous day. Denise's daughter recalled receiving a brief, unusual phone call from her mother around midnight, in which Denise expressed her love and instructed her children to prepare themselves for school the next morning. Concerned for their colleagues' safety, 2 officers visited a rental home that Wayne had recently maintained. During a brief separation from Denise, upon entering the residence, they discovered Wayne's mobile phone and personal bag on the kitchen counter, and further down the hallway, they found Wayne deceased on the floor, having sustained a single gunshot wound to the back of his head. The initial investigation focused on determining whether Wayne's death was related to his work as a police officer, but his colleagues described him as an exceptionally popular and friendly individual who lacked professional enemies. However, as detectives interviewed friends and acquaintances, they uncovered a history of significant trust issues and jealousy within the couple's relationship. Denise had frequently accused Wayne of infidelity, a tension that had previously resulted in a physical altercation in December of 2003, which led to a brief separation, although they had reconciled in November of 2004 after Denise lost her employment. Friends indicated that Wayne had recently decided to end the relationship permanently, planning to move out of their shared home. Inside the couple's primary residence, investigators discovered a handwritten note from Denise expressing deep despair on the kitchen counter of Wayne's rental home. They found another note in which Denise apologized for taking both of their lives and requested that their families be contacted in her hotel room. In Gainesville, investigators discovered a third, more extensive letter, which contained a line suggesting that she had accidentally shot Wayne, panicked, and fled the scene. They also found Wayne's .40 caliber service weapon, which Denise had apparently tried to load with a cartridge inserted backward, causing the weapon to jam and prompting her to use the .25 caliber handgun instead. When a Texas Ranger interviewed Denise at her hospital bedside, she exhibited severe cognitive deficits, claiming to have no memory of the shooting or her subsequent suicide attempt. Neurological experts note that the physical trauma of a bullet wound to the brain, combined with the psychological impact of a highly distressing event, can result in genuine amnesia, leaving the individual unable to recall the critical moments of the incident. Despite her memory loss and physical limitations, including partial paralysis and visual impairment, Denise was charged with first-degree murder. Her trial commenced in July of 2006. The defense faced the significant task of explaining her actions, arguing that the shooting had been a tragic accident, highlighting the line in her hotel note, and suggesting that her lack of intent was evidenced by her highly distressed state. However, the prosecution presented forensic evidence from the state crime lab demonstrating that the .25 caliber handgun required 4.5 to 5 pounds of pressure to pull the trigger, making an accidental discharge highly improbable. Furthermore, the fact that Wayne had been shot in the back of the head, and that Denise had failed to summon medical assistance, choosing instead to flee and write notes, strongly supported the prosecution's argument of a deliberate act, born of jealousy. The jury rejected the theory of an accident, finding Denise guilty of murder. While some observers wondered if her physical disability would elicit leniency. During the sentencing phase, the jury sentenced her to 62 years in prison, reflecting the gravity of the loss of Officer Wayne Irby. Conclusion: when we reflect on these three cases, we are reminded of the profound impact of domestic conflict and personal obsession on families and communities. The meticulous work of the investigators, forensic scientists, and legal professionals who resolved these complex cases highlights the enduring pursuit of justice. By analyzing the psychological vulnerabilities that lead to such tragic outcomes, we gain a deeper understanding of the importance of community awareness, support networks, and early intervention in domestic relationships, ensuring that the memory of those lost continues to inspire the triumph of good over evil. The human mind is a complex labyrinth, often balancing between deep affection and a dangerous desire for control. In the study of criminal psychology, we frequently observe that the most tragic acts of violence do not originate from external threats, but from within the very relationships that promise safety and devotion. When the fragile boundaries of love are replaced by possessiveness, jealousy, or a desperate need to maintain a false self-image, the consequences can be devastating. Through the careful examination of three distinct cases, we can observe how dedicated investigators, forensic specialists, and community members work together to uncover the truth behind sudden disappearances and senseless acts of violence. By analyzing these events through a psychological lens, we gain a deeper understanding of the warning signs of obsessive behavior and the enduring power of justice. The case of Tanisha Stewart and Timothy Shepard. In the spring of 2007, a sense of quiet dread settled over a neighborhood north of Houston, Texas. On Wednesday, March 21st of that year, investigator Sidney Miller and his partner drove down a highway, guided by two passengers in the back seat of their vehicle. The passengers were directing the detectives to an apartment complex, hoping to find some trace of a 19-year-old college freshman named Tanisha Stewart, who had been missing since March 15th. Upon arriving at the designated parking lot, one of the passengers pointed toward a large dumpster in the back of the complex. Fearing what they might find, the investigators peered inside, only to find the container completely empty. There were no obvious human remains, no immediate clues, and no clear answers. It was a frustrating moment in an investigation that was rapidly turning into a complex puzzle of betrayal, jealousy, and hidden anger. To understand how a young woman with a promising future could vanish so suddenly, investigators had to look back at her life and her relationships. Tanisha Stewart was known by her family and friends as someone exceptional. Raised in one of the more challenging neighborhoods of Houston, she had experienced hardship early in life, including the loss of her father at a young age. Despite these difficulties, she remained focused on her education, devoting herself to her studies and earning a scholarship to Texas Agricultural and Mechanical University. Tanisha was described as a bright, personable young woman with an infectious smile, which naturally drew people to her. In May 2005, while working at a local pizza restaurant, she met Timothy Shepard, a coworker who was 25 years old at the time. Despite an 8-year age difference, 17-year-old Tanisha was drawn to Timothy, who presented himself as someone mature and supportive. Over time, their working relationship transitioned into a serious romance. Tanisha's family initially questioned Timothy's motives, wondering why an older man was dating a teenage girl. To ease their concerns, Timothy made a conscious effort to win over her relatives. He spent time at her mother's home, offered to fix appliances, and assisted with computers, eventually earning their trust and being embraced like a member of the family. The dynamics of the relationship began to shift, however, when Tanisha left Houston to attend university. The physical distance of nearly 2 hours created a natural separation, allowing Tanisha to experience a new level of personal independence. For Timothy, this transition appeared to trigger deep-seated insecurities. Approximately 3 months into her first semester, Timothy briefly ended the relationship to reconcile with a former girlfriend, only to realize he had made what he considered a mistake. He traveled to the university campus to surprise Tanisha, and they resumed dating. But the relationship was no longer the same. Tanisha was growing, meeting new people, and focusing on her future, while Timothy's behavior became increasingly possessive. Psychological analysis of such dynamics often reveals that when one partner gains independence, the controlling partner may perceive this growth as a direct threat to their authority and self-worth. When Tanisha returned home for spring break in March 2007, she planned to spend time with her friends and attend a concert. Timothy's frustration with her independence became evident when he questioned why she was setting up appointments just to see him. Her sister, Gayla Taylor, recalled having a troubling premonition during this time, a nightmare that her sister was in danger, though Tanisha gently reassured her that everything would be fine. On Sunday, March 18, 2007, Gayla received a phone call from her mother, who was deeply concerned because no one had heard from Tanisha. She had failed to attend the concert she was looking forward to, and her mobile phone went unanswered. As 36 hours passed without any word, the family filed a missing persons report on Monday, March 19th. Investigators quickly identified Timothy Shepard as one of the last people to see Tanisha alive and invited him to the police station for questioning. Timothy claimed that he had picked Tanisha up early on Thursday morning, around 3 o'clock. According to his account, while they were in his vehicle, Tanisha received an early morning telephone call from a college friend named Mark Marks. Timothy admitted this call upset him, and when they arrived at his apartment, a confrontation ensued. Timothy told detectives that Tanisha refused to discuss the call and walked out of his apartment later that morning, leaving on foot. He maintained that he had no idea where she went, although investigators questioned him extensively. Timothy did not deviate from his story. He even provided voluntary written consent for the police to search his apartment. The initial search of the apartment did not yield any immediate physical evidence of a struggle or a crime. With no legal grounds to detain him, investigators returned his keys and allowed him to leave, while they turned their attention to other possibilities, including Mark Marks. When detectives interviewed Mark, they learned that he and Tanisha had been dating for about a month. Mark was aware of Timothy, and though he disliked sharing Tanisha's affection, he understood she was still trying to resolve her past relationship. Mark stated that he had last seen Tanisha around 3 o'clock on Thursday morning when he dropped her off. He denied any involvement in her disappearance and provided a verified alibi, proving he was at a social gathering with friends on South Padre Island at the time she vanished. With both Timothy and Mark seemingly cleared, investigators faced the distressing possibility that Tanisha had been abducted by a stranger after leaving Timothy's apartment. Search teams, K-9 units, and community volunteers combed the wooded areas near the complex, but found no traces of her. However, as the search continued, neighbors at the apartment complex began reporting highly unusual behavior from Timothy Shepard. Several residents noted that on the Friday following Tanisha's disappearance, Timothy spent the entire weekend continuously operating 2 outdoor grills. The smoke was so intense that neighbors had called the emergency services, fearing a fire. When first responders arrived, Timothy claimed he was preparing food for an upcoming church picnic of approximately 150 to 200 people. Firefighters noted seeing what appeared to be raw meat in a bathtub filled with water, which seemed consistent with his explanation. Additionally, a neighbor reported seeing Timothy pouring an excessive amount of bleach on his patio, so strong that the fumes burned her eyes. This combination of suspicious behaviors caused investigators to reevaluate Timothy as a primary suspect. The physical evidence of extensive cleaning and the intense, continuous use of the grill suggested a desperate attempt to destroy evidence. As pressure mounted, Tanisha's family reached out to community activist Quan Nell X to assist in finding answers. Quan Nell X, who had been contacted by Timothy's family to ensure a fair interaction with law enforcement, arranged a private meeting with Timothy at his apartment. During their conversation, which took place in the bathroom due to Timothy's paranoia about surveillance, the emotional weight of the situation became apparent. When asked directly if he had harmed Tanisha, Timothy's demeanor changed. He confessed to Quan Nell X that during their argument about Mark Marks, he had entered a rage, attacked Tanisha as she attempted to leave, and strangled her to death. He claimed he then placed her body in the apartment complex dumpster. Quan Nell X immediately communicated this confession to investigator Sidney Miller. However, when authorities arrived at the dumpster, they discovered it had been emptied. The waste had already been transported to a massive regional landfill. Investigators estimated that a thorough search of the landfill would cost over $500,000 and offer a very low probability of success. In a painful decision, Tanisha's family requested that the county not exhaust its resources on a potentially futile search. Following his arrest, Timothy exercised his right to legal counsel and refused to speak further. To secure a conviction without a body, investigators needed physical evidence. A specialized forensic team conducted a meticulous search of Timothy's apartment. Inside the kitchen garbage disposal, crime scene investigators discovered microscopic bone fragments and a small piece of tooth enamel, which was later matched to Tanisha. Near the outdoor grill, they also recovered charred bone fragments. While the charred pieces were too degraded for a definitive identification, the presence of the tooth enamel in the disposal provided a powerful piece of forensic evidence. The state presented its case in September 2008. The prosecution argued that Timothy, driven by a desire for control and unable to accept Tanisha's growing independence, had taken her life and attempted to destroy the evidence of his crime using the apartment appliances and outdoor grills to demonstrate premeditation and a history of controlling behavior. The prosecution called Timothy's cousin, Nicholas Shepard, to the stand. Nicholas testified that Timothy had previously threatened that if Tanisha ever left him, he would dismember her and boil her remains. This testimony shocked the courtroom and provided critical insight into the suspect's mindset. During the sentencing phase, Timothy chose to testify, claiming he had acted in self-defense. He asserted that Tanisha had attacked him with a knife and that he had blacked out during the struggle, remembering nothing until he realized she was no longer breathing. To support this claim, the defense presented photographs of minor cuts on Timothy's hands from the night of his arrest. However, the prosecution challenged this narrative by questioning Timothy about his actions after her death. When asked if he had placed her remains on a barbecue pit, Timothy corrected the prosecutor, stating he had used a smoker. This clinical, detached response deeply affected the jury. The jury rejected the claim of self-defense, upholding the guilty verdict for murder. Timothy Shepard was sentenced to 99 years in prison, ensuring he would no longer pose a threat to others. For Tanisha's family, the sentence offered a solemn resolution to a tragic chapter, allowing them to honor her memory and her legacy of academic ambition. The case of Latrice Curtis and Robert Reeves. In the early morning of Wednesday, January 30th, 2008, commuters traveling along Interstate 540 in Raleigh, North Carolina, made a tragic discovery. Alongside the busy highway lay the body of a young woman. First responders quickly determined that she had not been the victim of a traffic accident. She had been stabbed repeatedly. The victim was identified as 21-year-old Latrice Curtis, a student at North Carolina Central University. Her husband, Darren Curtis, had passed the crime scene on his way to work and recognized her white vehicle parked half a mile down the road. Distraught, he returned to the scene, where detectives confirmed his fears. Latrice Curtis was described as a vibrant, popular young woman who valued her education and had a promising future in business administration. She had met Darren, an accounting student and former National Guard soldier, during her first semester of college. The two fell in love and were married in April 2007, moving into a cozy apartment to begin their lives together. The brutality of the crime scene suggested a deeply personal attack. Latrice had suffered upwards of 40 stab wounds to her face, neck, and torso. Forensic investigators noted that her hands showed defensive wounds, indicating she had fought desperately for her life. Inside her abandoned vehicle, investigators found signs of a struggle, including a broken center console and trace amounts of blood on the driver's side door. A DNA sample was recovered from the steering wheel, which was sent to the state crime lab for analysis. During initial questioning, Darren Curtis explained that he last spoke to his wife around 10 o'clock on the evening of January 29th. She had called to say she was running late from her classes and planned to get something to eat. Darren went to sleep around 11:30, assuming she might have decided to stay at her parents' house. When he woke the next morning, he tried calling her, but the calls went straight to voicemail. An examination of Darren's hands and arms showed no signs of physical conflict, and a search of his home and vehicle yielded no evidence linking him to the crime. However, the autopsy of Latrice Curtis revealed a significant piece of evidence. A condom was recovered from her body, showing no signs of physical trauma associated with a sexual assault. This suggested she had engaged in consensual sexual activity shortly before her death. To identify her recent contacts, investigators subpoenaed her mobile phone records. The logs revealed a flurry of late-night calls between Latrice and a number belonging to Stephen Randolph, a well-known student and basketball player at her university. On February 1st, 2008, Stephen Randolph arrived at the sheriff's office to speak with detectives. He was accompanied by his roommate, Robert Reeves, a prominent local pastor often referred to as the bishop in the community. Stephen initially stated that he and Latrice were merely classmates who occasionally studied together. However, when presented with the telephone records and the autopsy findings, Stephen admitted they were involved in a consensual affair. He explained that on the night of January 29th, Latrice had visited the basement apartment he rented from Pastor Reeves. During their encounter, a condom had become trapped, and they were unable to retrieve it. Latrice left his residence around 10 o'clock, planning to address the issue at home. Stephen claimed that after she left, he drove to the home of his girlfriend, Velma Newton, where he stayed until approximately 1 o'clock in the morning. He stated that during this time, Latrice called him repeatedly, expressing concern about the trapped condom and the possibility of pregnancy. Stephen denied any involvement in her murder. To verify this timeline, investigators interviewed Pastor Robert Reeves. Reeves confirmed that Latrice had visited Stephen that evening. He stated that he had left the house at 8:15 to attend a church service and returned around 11:30, noting that both Stephen's and Latrice's vehicles were gone. Reeves also mentioned that Stephen had a collection of swords and knives in the home, which raised concerns for investigators given the nature of Latrice's injuries. A search of the residence, however, did not locate any weapons matching the forensic profile of the murder weapon. As detectives continued their investigation, they attempted to verify the alibis of those involved. When they interviewed Stephen's girlfriend, Velma Newton, she confirmed that Stephen had arrived at her apartment around 10 o'clock. She also shared that she and Stephen had recently been subjected to a series of anonymous, threatening phone calls demanding they end their relationship. Additionally, Stephen's car tires had recently been slashed. The breakthrough in the case came from a routine highway patrol report. State Trooper Isaac Cooper contacted detectives to report that at approximately 1:30 on the morning of January 30th, he had observed a disabled vehicle with its hazard lights on parked on the shoulder of Interstate 540 eastbound. Across the highway, on the westbound side, he noticed a white vehicle matching the description of Latrice's car. Before assisting the driver of the eastbound vehicle, Trooper Cooper ran the license plate through dispatch. The vehicle was registered to Pastor Robert Reeves. This discovery placed the pastor's car at the exact location where Latrice's body was found hours before she was discovered. Detectives brought Reeves back for further questioning. When asked why his car was on the highway that night, Reeves denied being there, insisting he had been at home asleep. However, investigators noticed visible scratches and abrasions on Reeves' hands and arms. He claimed he had received the injuries when he and Stephen fell while moving a heavy desk. When detectives asked Stephen about this incident, Stephen stated that no such fall had occurred. Investigators also subpoenaed the pastor's phone records, which revealed that the anonymous, threatening calls to Stephen and Velma had been placed from Reeves' phone using a blocking feature. Furthermore, when the pastor's sister was interviewed, she stated she had attended the church service Reeves claimed to be at, but did not see him there. The final piece of evidence came from the state crime lab. DNA analysis of the samples recovered from Latrice's steering wheel matched Robert Reeves. The psychological profile of Robert Reeves revealed a deeply compartmentalized life. While presenting himself as a respected spiritual leader, he harbored an intense, obsessive infatuation with his young roommate, Stephen. When Stephen engaged in relationships with women, Reeves responded with jealousy, attempting to sabotage those relationships through anonymous threats and vandalism. On the night of January 29th, after witnessing Latrice visit Stephen, Reeves' jealousy apparently escalated. Investigators believe he followed Latrice onto the highway, forced her to pull over, and attacked her in a state of obsessive rage. In September 2009, Robert Reeves stood trial for the murder of
Latrice Curtis.
The defense argued that Stephen Randolph was a more likely suspect, pointing to the presence of Stephen's DNA under Latrice's fingernails. The prosecution countered that this DNA was the result of their consensual contact earlier that evening, whereas the presence of Reeves' DNA on her steering wheel, combined with the trooper's eyewitness report and the physical injuries on his arms, left no reasonable doubt. On October 9, 2009, the jury found Robert Reeves guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The conviction of a trusted community figure left many in disbelief, but it served as a stark reminder of the hidden dangers of obsessive possessiveness. The case of Wayne Irby and Denise Miller. In the quiet early hours of Saturday, December 11, 2004, the night manager of a hotel in Gainesville, Texas, received a distress call from a guest room. Unable to open the locked door due to a deadbolt, the manager enlisted the help of a maintenance worker to force entry. Inside the darkened room, they found a 44-year-old woman lying on the floor, bleeding from an apparent gunshot wound to her head. Beside her lay a .25 caliber handgun, along with over-the-counter medication and alcohol. The woman, identified as Denise Miller, was conscious but disoriented. She was immediately transported to a regional trauma center in critical condition. The situation became significantly more complex when local authorities realized that Denise Miller and her boyfriend, 37-year-old police officer Wayne Irby, had been reported missing 24 hours earlier. Wayne Irby was a dedicated 6-year veteran of the Little Elm Police Department. On the morning of December 10th, he failed to report for his 6 o'clock shift, which was highly unusual behavior for him. His colleague, Officer Cynthia Medrano, grew concerned when he did not return her calls. Chief Waylon Rhodes dispatched officers to conduct a welfare check at the home. Wayne shared with Denise and her 2 children, Whitney and Walter. No one answered the door, and no vehicles were in the driveway. When investigators interviewed Denise's children, they learned that their mother had not returned home the previous night. Whitney recalled receiving a brief, unusual phone call from her mother around midnight, telling her she was running errands and expressing her love. Concerned for Wayne's safety, his partner, Detective Jerry Walker, and Officer James Wynn went to a rental property Wayne had recently leased across town.
The Pawn.
Entering the home, they found Wayne's personal items, including his mobile phone and bag on the kitchen counter. In a back hallway, they discovered Wayne Irby lying on the floor. He had died from a single gunshot wound to the back of his head. There were no signs of a struggle or forced entry at the scene. Given Wayne's profession, investigators initially considered whether the homicide was work-related. However, his colleagues described him as an approachable, well-liked officer with no known professional adversaries. Attention quickly turned to Denise Miller, a search of the home she shared with. Wayne revealed a handwritten note in the master bedroom expressing deep emotional distress and hinting at suicide. Additionally, Wayne's service weapon was missing from its holster. On the kitchen island of Wayne's rental home, investigators found a second note, written by Denise, which read, "I'm sorry I took both of our lives. Please contact our moms." This confession note suggested a planned murder-suicide. To understand the motive behind the tragedy, investigators looked into the couple's relationship history. They discovered a pattern of intense jealousy and instability. In December 2003, Denise had filed a domestic violence complaint against Wayne after finding him at his home with another female acquaintance. The confrontation had turned physical, resulting in minor injuries to both parties. Denise later withdrew the complaint, admitting she had exaggerated the details out of anger. Friends of the couple indicated that Denise struggled with trust issues, frequently calling Wayne's phone when he was on duty. Wayne had recently expressed a desire to end the relationship permanently and was planning to move back into his rental home. Following the discovery of Denise in the Gainesville hotel room, Texas Ranger Tracy Murphy attempted to interview her at the hospital. Denise had survived the gunshot wound but suffered significant cognitive impairment, partial paralysis, and blindness in one eye. During the recorded interview, Denise appeared highly disoriented and claimed to have no memory of the events in Little Elm or her own suicide attempt. When told that Wayne was deceased, she expressed genuine confusion and denial. Neurological experts noted that severe head trauma, combined with the ingestion of alcohol and medication, can result in genuine psychogenic or organic amnesia, where the brain blocks out traumatic memories as a defense mechanism. Despite her memory loss, physical evidence linked Denise to the crime. Ballistics testing confirmed that the bullet recovered from Wayne's had been fired from the .25 caliber handgun found beside Denise in the hotel room. The weapon was registered to her stepfather. Inside the hotel room, investigators also recovered Wayne's .40 caliber service pistol. It had jammed because a bullet had been inserted backward into the chamber, suggesting Denise had initially tried to use Wayne's weapon before turning her stepfather's gun on herself. A third, longer note found in the hotel room contained a line where Denise claimed the shooting of Wayne had been an accident, stating she had panicked and
fled.
On January 18, 2005, Denise Miller was formally charged with first-degree murder, following 18 months of medical rehabilitation and physical therapy. She was deemed competent to stand trial. The trial began on July 10, 2006. The defense argued that the shooting was a tragic accident, pointing to her final note as a dying declaration of intent. They suggested that if she had intended to kill Wayne, she would have loaded the weapon fully and fired multiple times. The prosecution countered by presenting forensic evidence regarding the weapon's mechanics. Testing showed that the .25 caliber handgun required approximately 4.5 to 5 pounds of pressure to pull the trigger, making an accidental discharge highly improbable. Furthermore, the single shot was delivered directly to the back of Wayne's head, and Denise's failure to call for medical assistance after the incident contradicted the claim of an accident. On July 12, 2006, the jury found Denise Miller guilty of murder at her sentencing hearing, taking into account her severe physical disabilities resulting from her suicide attempt. The court spared her the death penalty and sentenced her to 62 years in prison. Reflections on criminal psychology and justice. These three cases, though distinct in their locations and details, share common psychological undercurrents. They demonstrate how unresolved insecurities, obsessive jealousy, and the desire to control another individual can erode the moral boundaries that govern human behavior. In the case of Timothy Shepard, we see how an inability to accept a partner's growing independence led to a fatal escalation of violence, followed by a clinical attempt to evade detection. In the case of Robert Reeves, we observe how a deep, unrequited obsession with another person can manifest as externalized rage against anyone perceived as a barrier to that obsession. In the case of Denise Miller, we see the destructive path of pathological jealousy, where the fear of abandonment culminated in a tragic act of violence and a subsequent attempt to end her own life. In each instance, the resolution of these complex cases was made possible through the meticulous work of law enforcement officers, forensic scientists, and alert community members. By examining the physical evidence, verifying timelines, and analyzing behavioral patterns, investigators were able to present clear, logical narratives to the courts, ensuring that those responsible were held accountable. For the families of Tanisha Stewart, Latrice Curtis, and Wayne Irby, the legal outcomes provided a measure of justice, though the loss of their loved ones remains a permanent void. These narratives serve as an educational resource, encouraging communities to remain vigilant, to recognize the early warning signs of obsessive and controlling behavior, and to support the systems of justice that work to protect the vulnerable and honor the memory of the victims. The anatomy of toxic possessiveness and the illusion of control. The human mind is a complex landscape where love and obsession can sometimes become dangerously intertwined. In the realm of criminal psychology, one of the most critical challenges is understanding how relationships that begin with warmth and affection can devolve into control, violence, and tragedy. True justice is not merely about identifying the perpetrator and securing a conviction. It is also about honoring the memory of those whose lives were cut short, understanding the psychological undercurrents that led to their demise, and learning how communities can protect their vulnerable members. This analysis examines three distinct cases that occurred across the United States of America. Each case represents a different manifestation of toxic control, obsessive projection, and the devastating consequences of pathological jealousy. By looking beneath the surface of these tragedies, we can find the warning signs, understand the meticulous work of the investigators, and appreciate the triumph of justice over darkness. The illusion of ownership and the case of Tanisha Stewart. The city of Houston, Texas, is a sprawling metropolis known for its industry and
diversity.
Within its tougher neighborhoods, families work tirelessly to build better futures for their children. It was in this environment that Tanisha Stewart grew up. One of 6 children, Tanisha experienced adversity early in life, losing her father when she was very young. Despite the economic hardships and the challenging surroundings, she refused to let her circumstances define her. Tanisha was a remarkably bright, diligent, and focused young woman. She was blessed with a natural warmth, an infectious smile, and a determination that stood out to everyone who knew her. Her family recognized early on that she was destined for great achievements. She applied herself to her studies with absolute seriousness, earning a scholarship to Texas Agricultural and Mechanical University. For Tanisha, education was the pathway to a wider world, a way to lift herself and her family to new heights. At the age of 17, while working at a local pizza restaurant, Tanisha met Timothy Shepard, who was 25 years old at the time.
Timothy was
handsome, articulate, and presented himself as a supportive partner.
Despite the
8-year age gap, Tanisha was drawn to him. She valued partners who could challenge her intellectually, and Timothy initially seemed to fit that description. As their relationship developed, Timothy spent significant time with Tanisha's family, helping with household tasks, fixing electronics, and presenting himself as a reliable, protective figure. The family welcomed him, treating him like a brother and a son. However, a fundamental shift occurred when Tanisha transitioned from high school to college. In the fall of 2006, she moved to the university campus, located approximately 2 hours away from Houston. For the first time, Tanisha was experiencing independence, meeting new friends, and expanding her horizons. This growth, which should have been celebrated, triggered a deep insecurity within Timothy. In the study of criminal psychology, this dynamic is frequently observed in possessive personalities. When a partner begins to gain autonomy, the controlling individual experiences a perceived loss of ownership. Timothy's behavior grew increasingly domineering. He would call and harass her, and on several occasions he even drove to the university campus, wandering through the grounds in an attempt to locate her when she did not answer his phone calls. Though the couple broke up briefly, they resumed dating, but the underlying tension remained. In March of 2007, Tanisha returned to Houston for her spring break. She spent time with friends, planning to attend a concert. Her family noticed that she was attempting to establish boundaries with Timothy, who grew increasingly frustrated by her independence. On Thursday, March 15th, 2007, Tanisha disappeared. The alarm was raised when Tanisha failed to attend the concert and did not respond to any attempts at contact. Her family, knowing her reliable nature, immediately sensed that something was wrong. Her sister, Gayla Taylor had experienced a troubling dream days prior, which magnified her anxiety. After 36 hours of silence, the family filed a missing persons report on Monday, March 19th, 2007. Investigator Sidney Miller and his partner took charge of the case. They knew that in missing persons cases, the first 24 to 48 hours are the most critical. If a person is not located within that window, the probability of a tragic outcome increases significantly. The detectives began by interviewing the individuals who had last seen Tanisha. Among them was Timothy Shepard. When questioned at the police station, Timothy claimed that he had picked Tanisha up at approximately 3 in the morning on Thursday. He stated that while they were driving, she received a phone call from a college friend named Mark Marks. This call had upset Timothy, leading to a confrontation at his apartment. According to Timothy's initial account, Tanisha refused to discuss the matter and walked out of the apartment later that morning, leaving on foot. He claimed that was the last time he saw her. The investigators searched Timothy's apartment with his voluntary consent, but they found no immediate signs of a struggle or foul play. At that stage, they had no physical evidence to detain him, so they returned his keys and allowed him to leave. Detectives then turned their attention to Mark Marks, the 19-year-old college friend who had called Tanisha. Marks was cooperative, explaining that he and Tanisha had been dating for a short period. He stated that Tanisha was preparing to end her relationship with Timothy. Marks provided a solid, verified alibi, proving he was with friends at a holiday destination at the time of her disappearance. He was ruled out as a suspect. With their primary suspects seemingly in the clear, investigators faced the chilling possibility that Tanisha had been abducted by a stranger after leaving Timothy's apartment. They conducted extensive searches of the surrounding wooded areas, utilizing canine units. At one point, a canine unit locked onto a scent in the woods, but it proved to be the remains of a deceased animal, leaving the search at a standstill. Meanwhile, the community was actively mobilizing. Gayla Taylor organized volunteer search parties, knocking on doors and speaking with neighbors near Timothy's apartment complex. It was during these community inquiries that crucial pieces of information began to emerge. Multiple neighbors reported that on the Friday following Tanisha's disappearance, Timothy had been operating two barbecue grills continuously on his patio. The smoke had been so intense that neighbors had feared a fire and called the emergency services. Furthermore, another resident reported seeing Timothy pouring an extraordinary amount of bleach onto his patio, creating a scent so strong that it irritated the eyes of
Passers-by.
These behaviors were highly anomalous. It seemed inexplicable that a man whose girlfriend had just disappeared would focus his energy on an intense, multi-day outdoor cooking session rather than assisting in the search. When the fire department had responded to the smoke complaint, Timothy had claimed he was preparing food for a large church gathering. A firefighter recalled seeing what appeared to be raw meat soaking in a bathtub inside the apartment. Recognizing the gravity of these reports, Tanisha's family contacted Quannell X, a prominent community activist in Houston who often facilitated peaceful surrenders of individuals wanted by law enforcement. Interestingly, Timothy's family had also reached out to Quannell, claiming that Timothy was being unfairly targeted by investigators. Quannell X arranged to meet Timothy privately at his apartment. Timothy was visibly stressed, paranoid that the apartment might be monitored by authorities. He insisted that they talk in the bathroom. When Quannell looked him in the eyes and asked him directly if he had harmed Tanisha, the psychological weight of the crime became too heavy for Timothy to bear. Timothy confessed that when Tanisha refused to discuss her relationship with Mark Marks and attempted to leave the apartment, he flew into a jealous rage. He attacked her, strangling her to death. Timothy told Quannell that he had placed her body in the dumpster behind the apartment complex. Quannell immediately contacted investigator Sidney Miller. On Wednesday, March 21st, 2007, at 5:30 in the afternoon, the investigators, accompanied by Quannell and Timothy, drove to the apartment complex dumpster. To their horror, the dumpster was completely empty. It had been cleared by the sanitation service earlier that week. The realization was devastating. In a city of Houston's size, the contents of the dumpster had already been transported to a massive regional landfill. A search of the landfill would cover an area equivalent to multiple football fields, costing upwards of $500,000 with an extremely low probability of success. Tanisha's family, showing incredible grace and strength, requested that the county not expend those resources on a potentially futile search. Shortly after his arrest, Timothy invoked his right to counsel and refused to speak further. Without a body, prosecutors knew that securing a conviction for murder would be an immense challenge. The crime scene investigation team returned to Timothy's apartment for a much more meticulous forensic search. Using advanced forensic techniques, investigators discovered microscopic evidence that Timothy had tried to destroy. Inside the kitchen garbage disposal, they found tiny bone fragments and a piece of tooth enamel. The crime lab subsequently matched the enamel to Tanisha's dental profile. Additionally, investigators recovered charred bone fragments from the ground near the patio, where the grills had been operated. The psychological reality of the crime was far more gruesome than a simple strangulation. The evidence suggested that Timothy, in a desperate attempt to conceal his actions, had dismembered and incinerated the remains of the woman he claimed to love. The trial of the state of Texas versus Timothy Shepard began on September 29, 2008. The prosecution faced the hurdle of presenting a murder case without a body, relying primarily on forensic fragments, the confession to Quannell X, and circumstantial evidence. To establish premeditation and character, the prosecution called Timothy's cousin Nicholas Shepard to the stand. Nicholas delivered shocking testimony, revealing that Timothy had previously made threats regarding Tanisha, stating that if she ever attempted to leave him, he would kill her, dismember her, and boil her remains. This testimony illustrated that the horrific method of disposal is not a spontaneous decision made in panic, but a scenario Timothy had contemplated before. Quan Nell X also testified, recounting the confession in the bathroom. In a bold move during the sentencing phase, Timothy took the stand in his own defense. He attempted to portray himself as the victim, claiming that Tanisha had attacked him with a knife and that he had acted in self-defense, blacking out during the struggle. He presented photographs of minor cuts on his hands from the night of his arrest. However, any attempt to garner sympathy was shattered during cross-examination. When the prosecutor asked Timothy about placing her body parts on the barbecue pit, Timothy corrected the prosecutor, stating that he had used a smoker, not a barbecue pit. This cold, clinical correction revealed an absence of remorse that deeply impacted the jury. The jury returned a verdict of guilty. Timothy Shepard was sentenced to 99 years in prison, the maximum penalty allowed. While the conviction could not restore the brilliant future that had been stolen from Tanisha Stewart, it ensured that a dangerous individual would remain removed from society, and it stood as a testament to the dedication of her family, the community, and the investigators who refused to let her disappear without a trace. The Shadow of Infatuation and the Case of Latrice Curtis. Our second case study takes us to Raleigh, North Carolina, where we examine how an individual's internal obsessions can project outward, resulting in a violent tragedy involving an innocent third party. On the cold winter morning of Wednesday, January 30th, 2008, at approximately 7:30, morning commuters on Interstate 540 noticed a disturbing sight. Lying in the grass on the shoulder of the busy highway was the body of a young woman. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but she was already deceased. An initial examination revealed that she had not been the victim of a pedestrian traffic accident. She had been brutally stabbed over 40 times, with severe wounds concentrated around her face, neck, and torso. Her carotid artery and jugular vein had been severed, and her vocal cords had been cut. It was a crime of extreme violence, indicating an intense, personalized rage. A short distance down the highway, investigators located a white sedan abandoned on the shoulder with its hazard lights flashing. Inside the vehicle, there were clear signs of a violent struggle, including a broken center console and blood on the driver's side door. Among the commuters slowing down to pass the crime scene that morning was Darren Curtis. He noticed the backup, saw the blue tarp covering the victim, and then spotted the white sedan. His heart sank as he recognized the vehicle. It belonged to his wife. Frantic, Darren returned to the scene, where detectives confirmed his worst fears. The victim was his 21-year-old wife, Latrice Curtis. Latrice was a vibrant, ambitious business administration student at North Carolina Central University in Durham. She had grown up in a protective household as the only girl among several brothers, cherished for her infectious smile and outgoing personality. She had married Darren, a respectful former National Guard soldier, just 9 months prior. They had moved into a cozy apartment, and by all external appearances, they were a young couple embarking on a promising life together. As investigators processed the crime scene, they noted that Latrice's hands showed defensive wounds, indicating she had fought fiercely for her life. The crime scene investigators collected DNA samples from her fingernails and the steering wheel of her car, sending them to the state crime lab. To understand the motive behind such a brutal attack, detectives interviewed Darren Curtis. He explained that he had last spoken to Latrice around 10 o'clock the previous evening. She had called to say she was running late from her studies and was going to get food before heading home. Darren had gone to sleep around 11:30. When he awoke the next morning, his calls to her went straight to voicemail. Assuming she had stayed overnight with her family, he showered and left for work, only to encounter the tragedy on the highway. Investigators searched the couple's apartment and Darren's vehicle, finding no evidence of conflict. Darren showed no signs of physical injury, and his cooperation was absolute. A critical breakthrough occurred during the autopsy. Pathologists discovered a condom inside Latrice's body. There were no physical trauma marks indicating a sexual assault, suggesting that she had engaged in consensual intercourse shortly before her death. This discovery shifted the focus of the investigation toward her personal life. Subpoenaed phone records revealed a flurry of calls and text messages around midnight on the night of her disappearance. These calls were exchanged with a number registered to Stephen Randolph. Stephen Randolph was a prominent student and athlete at North Carolina Central University, an aspiring basketball player with ambitions of entering the National Basketball Association. When investigators contacted him, Stephen initially claimed they were merely classmates. However, when presented with the phone records and the forensic findings, he admitted to a secret, passionate affair. Stephen explained that on the night of Tuesday, January 29th, Latrice had visited his residence. During their intimate encounter, the condom had become lodged inside her. Unable to retrieve it, Latrice decided to return home to handle the situation in private, leaving around 10 o'clock. Stephen claimed that after she left, he drove to the residence of his primary girlfriend, Velma Newton. During that drive and later in the night, Latrice began calling him repeatedly, expressing panic that she might become pregnant. Stephen insisted he had nothing to do with her murder, pointing out that an unwanted pregnancy